Picture this. A transfer student walks into a new school, quiet and unassuming, while a group of notorious bullies decides she's their next target. They corner her after class, expecting an easy victim. But what they don't know is that she's been training in karate since she was 7 years old. What happens next will leave you absolutely stunned and prove that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. This is a story of hidden strength, unexpected justice, and a moment that changed everything at Riverside High forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Riverside High School as Maya Chen stepped through the main entrance for the first time. The sprawling brick building looked like every other suburban high school she'd seen in movies, complete with students clustering in their usual social formations on the front steps. At 17, Maya had perfected the art of blending in during her family's frequent moves. But this transition felt different somehow. Her father's promotion had brought them to Millbrook, a mid-sized town in Oregon, where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business before breakfast. Maya adjusted the straps of her worn leather backpack, the same one that had traveled with her from San Diego to Phoenix to Denver, and now here. Inside, carefully wrapped in protective cloth, sat her most precious possessions, her collection of karate belts, each one representing years of disciplined training and countless hours in dojos across the country. Her sensei in Denver, Master Tanaka, had given her a letter of recommendation for the local dojo, but Maya wasn't sure she was ready to start over again with new instructors and training partners. The hallways of Riverside High buzzed with the familiar energy of a Monday morning. Students hurried between lockers, their conversations mixing into a symphony of teenage life. Maya had received her schedule and locker combination in the mail the week before, giving her a small advantage in navigating the maze of corridors. Her locker was on the second floor, tucked between the science wing and the gymnasium, a location that would prove significant in ways she couldn't yet imagine. As Maya spun the combination lock, she caught glimpses of her new classmates. There was the usual mix of athletes, theater kids, academic overachievers, and various other social groups that formed the complex ecosystem of high school life. She'd learned to identify these patterns quickly during her many school transitions, understanding that finding her place would take time and careful observation. Her first period was advanced chemistry with Mr. Rodriguez, a middle-aged teacher known for his enthusiastic but demanding approach to science education. Maya had always excelled in academics, partly because books and formulas remained constant even when everything else in her life shifted. She found a seat in the middle of the classroom, close enough to show engagement but far enough back to avoid unwanted attention. The class proceeded smoothly until a group of students made their entrance 5 minutes after the bell. They walked in with the confident swagger of those who'd never faced real consequences for their actions. Leading the group was Trevor Martinez, a senior with the kind of athletic build that came from years of football training and the attitude that came from being told he was special since elementary school. His dark hair was styled in the latest trend, and his jersey displayed his number with pride. Behind Trevor walked his closest allies, Marcus Webb, a stocky wrestler whose reputation for aggression extended far beyond the mat, and Jessica Torres, whose beauty was matched only by her cruel streak when it came to targeting those she deemed beneath her social status. The trio commanded attention wherever they went, not through respect, but through the kind of fear that kept other students silent when they witnessed their behavior. Mr. Rodriguez barely glanced up from his lesson plan as the three took their seats, a reaction that told Maya everything she needed to know about the power dynamics at Riverside High. Teachers, administrators, and even other students had learned that challenging this particular group often resulted in more problems than solutions. Trevor's father sat on the school board, Marcus's family owned the largest construction company in town, and Jessica's mother was the mayor. Their influence extended far beyond the school walls. Maya tried to focus on her notes, but she couldn't help noticing how other students' behavior shifted when the trio entered. Conversations became quieter. Shoulders hunched slightly, and eyes avoided direct contact. She'd seen this pattern before in other schools, the way certain students could create an atmosphere of tension simply by existing in the same space. During the lesson on molecular bonding, Maya found herself genuinely interested in the subject matter. Chemistry had always fascinated her, the way different elements could combine to create something entirely new, sometimes explosive, sometimes stable. She raised her hand to answer a question about covalent bonds, her voice clear and confident as she explained the concept. Mr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly, making a note in his gradebook. Trevor turned in his seat to get a better look at the new girl who had the audacity to participate actively in class. His eyes narrowed as he took in Maya's appearance. Her simple black t-shirt, well-worn jeans, and the calluses on her knuckles that most people wouldn't notice, but that told a story to those who knew what to look for. She was pretty in an understated way, with long black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and dark eyes that seemed to observe everything while revealing nothing. During the transition between first and second period, Maya navigated the crowded hallways with practiced efficiency. She'd learned to move through new environments like water, flowing around obstacles and avoiding unnecessary friction. Her second period was American history with Mrs. Patterson, a teacher who'd been at Riverside High for nearly 3 decades and had seen every type of student imaginable. The history classroom was decorated with maps, timelines, and portraits of significant figures from America's past. Maya chose a seat near the window, where natural light would help her stay alert during what she suspected might be a challenging class. Mrs. Patterson had a reputation for expecting her students to think critically about historical events rather than simply memorize dates and names. As students filed in, Maya noticed that Trevor, Marcus, and Jessica had this class as well. They took seats in the back corner, their body language suggesting they considered themselves above the academic requirements that governed everyone else. Maya had encountered similar groups at previous schools, students whose sense of entitlement allowed them to coast through classes while others worked hard for their grades. Mrs. Patterson began the day's lesson on the civil rights movement, a topic that immediately captured Maya's attention. Her grandmother had been a civil rights activist in California during the 1960s, and Maya had grown up hearing stories about the courage required to stand up against systemic injustice. She found herself taking detailed notes, genuinely engaged with the material in a way that seemed foreign to many of her classmates. 20 minutes into the lesson, Trevor decided to make his presence known. He began making subtle comments under his breath, just loud enough for nearby students to hear, but quiet enough to avoid immediate detection by Mrs. Patterson. His targets seemed random at first, but Maya soon realized he was systematically trying to disrupt the learning environment for his own entertainment. When Mrs. Patterson asked the class to discuss the concept of peaceful resistance, Maya raised her hand to contribute. She spoke thoughtfully about how her grandmother had participated in sit-ins and peaceful protests, sharing a personal perspective that added depth to the academic discussion. Several students nodded along, genuinely interested in her family's connection to the historical events they were studying. Trevor's reaction was immediate and predictable. He made a comment about new girl trying to show off that was just loud enough for Maya to hear. She felt her jaw tighten slightly, but she'd learned long ago that responding to such provocations rarely improved the situation. Instead, she continued taking notes, filing away information about Trevor's behavior for future reference. The pattern continued throughout the week. Maya attended her classes, participated appropriately, and began forming tentative connections with a few classmates who seemed genuinely interested in friendship rather than social positioning. There was Emma Walsh, a quiet girl in her English class who shared Maya's love of literature, and David Kim, a fellow chemistry enthusiast who invited her to join the academic team. But Trevor and his group had apparently decided that Maya's presence at Riverside High required their attention. They began with small gestures, blocking her path in hallways, making comments about her clothes or appearance, and generally trying to establish their dominance through intimidation tactics. Maya recognized the behavior pattern from previous schools and other life experiences. She dealt with bullies before, but never in a place where they seemed to have such institutional protection. During lunch on Thursday of her first week, Maya sat with Emma and David at a table near the windows in the cafeteria. The conversation flowed easily as they discussed their weekend plans and upcoming assignments. Maya felt the first genuine stirrings of belonging she'd experienced since arriving in Millbrook. Perhaps this school would be different. Perhaps she could finally settle somewhere and build lasting friendships. Trevor appeared at their table without invitation, flanked by Marcus and Jessica as usual. His smile was predatory as he looked down at Maya, who continued eating her sandwich without acknowledging his presence. This wasn't her first encounter with aggressive personalities, and she'd learned that showing fear or immediate deference often escalated situations unnecessarily. "So, new girl, Trevor said, his voice carrying the tone of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "I heard you think you're pretty smart. Think you're better than the rest of us here in little old Millbrook." Maya finished chewing her bite of sandwich before responding, her voice calm and even. "I don't think I'm better than anyone. I'm just trying to do well in my classes." Jessica laughed, a sound that held no warmth. "Oh, she's trying to do well in her classes. How adorable. Tell me, Maya, where exactly did you transfer from? Somewhere more sophisticated than our little town?" The question was loaded with implications, designed to position Maya as an outsider who looked down on the local community. Maya recognized the trap immediately. Any answer that mentioned the cities where she'd previously lived would be twisted to support their narrative of her as an arrogant newcomer who thought she was superior to longtime residents. "I've lived in several places," Maya replied diplomatically. "My family moves for my father's work. Millbrook seems like a nice community." Marcus leaned forward, his presence physically intimidating in a way that was clearly intentional. "Several places, huh? Sounds like maybe you never learned how to respect the established order. Maybe you need someone to teach you how things work around here." Emma and David exchanged nervous glances, recognizing the shift in tone that suggested the conversation was moving beyond casual harassment into more dangerous territory. Maya noticed their discomfort and made a mental note to ensure her problems didn't extend to the few friendly faces she'd encountered at Riverside High. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said, standing up from the table with her lunch tray, "but I think I can figure things out on my own." She walked away from the confrontation with measured steps, neither hurrying nor dawdling, her posture straight and confident. Inside, however, her mind was already analyzing the encounter and preparing for what would likely come next. She'd recognized the pattern too many times to ignore it now.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Trevor and his friends had marked her as a target, and her refusal to show appropriate deference had likely escalated their interest rather than discouraging it. After school that day, Maya walked the 6 blocks to her family's new house, a modest 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood filled with mature trees and well-maintained lawns. Her mother, Dr. Maya Chen, was a pediatrician who had secured a position at the local hospital, while her father, James Chen, worked as an engineer for a renewable energy company with offices throughout the Pacific Northwest. Maya found her mother in the kitchen, reviewing patient files while preparing dinner. Dr. Chen looked up with a warm smile as her daughter entered, noting the slight tension in Maya's shoulders that suggested the day hadn't been entirely smooth. "How was school today, sweetheart?" her mother asked, closing the medical folder and giving Maya her full attention. Maya considered her response carefully. Her parents had been supportive through all their moves, always encouraging her to build connections and find her place in new communities. They'd also been protective when necessary, intervening with school administrators when situations required adult involvement. However, Maya had learned that some battles were best fought independently, at least initially. "It was fine," Maya said, opening the refrigerator to get a glass of water. "I'm starting to get to know some people." The classes seemed challenging but manageable. Dr. Chen studied her daughter's face, recognizing the careful neutrality that Maya employed when she was processing complex social situations. As a mother who had watched her daughter navigate multiple school transitions, she developed an ability to read the subtle signs that indicated when Maya was dealing with more than typical new student adjustments. "Any problems I should know about?" her mother asked gently. Maya shook her head, offering a reassuring smile. "Nothing I can't handle. Just the usual stuff that comes with being the new kid." That evening, Maya retreated to her bedroom to work on homework assignments and respond to messages from friends at her previous school. Her room was still in the process of being organized, with boxes stacked against one wall and her furniture arranged in a temporary configuration that would suffice until she decided on a permanent layout. On her desk sat a framed photograph of her with Master Tanaka and her fellow students from the dojo in Denver. They were all wearing their GIS, their various belt ranks visible in the formal group photo taken after her last tournament. Maya had earned her black belt 2 years earlier, but she'd continued training and competing at increasingly advanced levels. The discipline, focus, and physical conditioning that came with serious martial arts training had become central to her identity. Maya opened her laptop and began researching local dojos in Millbrook. She found three possibilities: a traditional Shotokan karate school, a mixed martial arts gym that included karate among its offerings, and a small dojo that specialized in traditional Japanese martial arts. Each had positive reviews and seemed to maintain serious training standards. But Maya knew that finding the right fit would require visiting in person to observe classes and meet instructors. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. "Hope you're okay after lunch today." Trevor can be really intense sometimes. Maya appreciated the concern, but she also noted the careful language Emma used to describe Trevor's behavior. Intense was a diplomatic way of describing what was clearly bullying behavior that had become normalized within the school's social environment. Maya typed back a brief response thanking Emma for her concern and suggesting they study together for their upcoming English test. Friday morning arrived with gray clouds and the promise of rain, weather that matched Maya's growing apprehension about the school day ahead. She'd experienced enough similar situations to recognize the pattern: initial confrontation, testing boundaries, escalation of tactics, and eventually a more serious incident that would force resolution one way or another. During first period chemistry, Trevor made a point of arriving on time and taking a seat directly behind Maya. Throughout the class, he engaged in a steady stream of low-level harassment, tapping his pencil against her chair, making quiet comments about her appearance and behavior, and generally trying to create an atmosphere of discomfort without crossing lines that would prompt immediate teacher intervention. Maya maintained her focus on the lesson, taking notes on chemical reactions and participating in the lab exercise as if Trevor didn't exist. This response seemed to frustrate him, as bullies typically sought visible reactions that confirmed their power to affect their target's emotional states. Maya's apparent indifference was clearly not the response he'd expected or wanted. During the transition to second period, Trevor stepped closer to Maya in the hallway, his proximity clearly intentional and intimidating. "You know, new girl, ignoring people around here isn't considered polite. Maybe you need to learn some manners." Maya continued walking without acknowledging the comment, but she noticed Marcus and Jessica flanking her on either side, creating a loose formation that could easily escalate into a more confrontational situation. Other students in the hallway seemed to sense the tension, giving the group a wider berth than usual. In American history class, Mrs. Patterson announced that students would be working on a group project about different aspects of social movements throughout American history. Maya felt a moment of optimism, thinking that collaborative academic work might provide an opportunity to build connections with classmates while demonstrating her genuine interest in learning. Her optimism was short-lived. As Mrs. Patterson began organizing students into groups, Trevor raised his hand with a suggestion that carried the weight of established social hierarchy. "Mrs. Patterson, I think it would be great if Maya could work with my group. We'd love to help the new student get integrated into our classroom community." The offer was phrased in language that sounded helpful and inclusive, but Maya recognized it as a trap. Being forced to work closely with Trevor and his friends would provide them with numerous opportunities for harassment, while making it difficult for her to seek help without appearing uncooperative or antisocial. Mrs. Patterson, however, seemed pleased by what appeared to be student leadership and social integration. "That's very thoughtful, Trevor. Maya, would you like to join Trevor's group for the project?" Maya found herself in an impossible position. Declining the offer would make her appear ungrateful and antisocial, potentially damaging her relationship with a teacher whose class she genuinely enjoyed. Accepting would place her in a situation where she'd be subjected to sustained harassment while being unable to defend herself without risking her academic standing. "That's very kind," Maya replied carefully, "but I was hoping to work with Emma and David if they don't already have a full group." Trevor's expression darkened slightly at her diplomatic rejection, but he maintained his facade of helpful concern. "Oh, sure, that makes sense. Though I should mention that our group usually gets the best grades on these projects. We know what Mrs. Patterson is looking for." The implication was clear. Rejecting his offer meant accepting inferior academic outcomes. It was a calculated manipulation designed to make Maya second-guess her instincts in favor of practical considerations. Mrs. Patterson resolved the situation by suggesting that groups shouldn't exceed 4 students, and since Trevor's group already had 3 members, Maya would indeed work with Emma and David. Maya felt a moment of relief, but she also noticed the look that passed between Trevor and his friends. Her continued resistance to their overtures was clearly being interpreted as a challenge that required escalation. During lunch, Maya sat with Emma and David again, but the atmosphere was different from the previous day. Both of her new friends seemed nervous, glancing frequently toward the table where Trevor's group held court. Emma finally leaned forward and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Maya, I don't want to tell you what to do, but maybe you should consider being a little more friendly with Trevor and his friends. They have a lot of influence here, and they can make things really difficult for people they don't like." David nodded in agreement, his expression troubled. "I've seen what happens to students who get on their bad side. Teachers don't really intervene, and other students are too scared to get involved. It's just easier to stay out of their way." Maya appreciated their concern, but she also recognized the fear that governed social interactions at Riverside High. Trevor and his friends had created an environment where their behavior was enabled by everyone's reluctance to challenge their authority. Students, teachers, and administrators had all found ways to rationalize or ignore the harassment rather than confronting it directly. "I understand what you're saying," Maya replied thoughtfully, "but I'm not really built to back down from bullies. It never works anyway. They just see it as weakness and push harder." Emma looked around nervously before responding. "But Maya, you don't understand how things work here. These aren't just typical bullies. They have real power, and they're not afraid to use it." The conversation was interrupted by Trevor's arrival at their table, but this time he came alone. His approach seemed more casual, almost friendly, as if the previous confrontations had been playful misunderstandings rather than deliberate intimidation. "Hey Maya," he said, pulling up a chair without invitation. "I wanted to apologize if I came across as pushy yesterday. Sometimes I get a little protective of our school community, and I realize that might have seemed unwelcoming." Maya studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity or deception. Trevor was clearly intelligent and socially skilled, capable of modulating his behavior when it served his purposes. This apparent olive branch could be genuine remorse, a strategic repositioning, or a setup for something worse. "Apology accepted," Maya said neutrally, neither encouraging nor rejecting his overture. Trevor smiled, and for a moment he seemed like any other high school student trying to make amends for poor behavior. "Great! You know, there's a party at my house tomorrow night. Nothing too crazy, just some friends hanging out. You should come. It would be a good way to meet people and get integrated into the social scene here." Emma and David exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Maya sensed undercurrents in the invitation that she couldn't quite identify, but her instincts suggested caution. "That's very kind of you to invite me," Maya replied, "but I'm not really a party person. I prefer smaller gatherings." Trevor's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Sure, I understand. Maybe another time. But Maya, I hope you know that fitting in here requires being open to new experiences. Students who isolate themselves tend to have a harder time finding their place in our community." The message was clear, despite its diplomatic phrasing. Social integration required accepting Trevor's invitations and following his lead. Maya's continued independence was being framed as antisocial behavior that would result in isolation and difficulty. After Trevor left their table, Emma leaned forward urgently. "Maya, you should seriously consider going to that party. I know you said you're not a party person, but declining Trevor's invitations repeatedly is going to make him angry. And when Trevor gets angry, bad things happen to people." Maya spent the rest of lunch considering her options. She could continue resisting Trevor's overtures and accept whatever consequences followed, or she could compromise her principles and attempt to appease someone whose behavior she found fundamentally unacceptable. Neither option appealed to her, but she'd learned that sometimes the choice wasn't between good and bad options, but between bad and worse options. That afternoon, Maya decided to visit one of the local dojos she'd researched online. The Millbrook Traditional Karate Academy was located in a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown, and its website suggested a serious approach to martial arts training that emphasized discipline, respect, and continuous improvement. She arrived during an advanced class session and was greeted by Sensei Williams, a woman in her 40s whose bearing immediately commanded respect. Sensei Williams invited Maya to observe the class, and Maya found herself impressed by the skill level and focused intensity of the students. During a break in the session, Sensei Williams approached Maya with a warm but assessing expression. "I understand you're interested in joining our dojo. What's your background in martial arts?" Maya explained her training history and mentioned the letter of recommendation from Master Tanaka. Sensei Williams nodded approvingly as she reviewed the letter, clearly familiar with Master Tanaka's reputation and training methods. "Master Tanaka speaks very highly of your technical skills and personal character," Sensei Williams said. "We'd be honored to have you train with us. When would you like to start?" For the first time since arriving in Millbrook, Maya felt genuinely welcomed and valued for her authentic self rather than her willingness to conform to others' expectations. The dojo represented a space where respect was earned through dedication and improvement rather than social positioning or intimidation. "I'd like to start as soon as possible," Maya replied. "Are there classes on weekday evenings?" Sensei Williams outlined the class schedule and explained the dojo's philosophy and expectations. Maya felt her spirits lifting as she imagined return to the structured environment of serious martial arts training. The physical conditioning, mental discipline, and spiritual centering that came with regular practice would provide exactly the stability she needed while navigating the social challenges at Riverside High. That evening, Maya called Master Tanaka to update him on her progress and thank him for the letter of recommendation. Her former sensei listened thoughtfully as she described her first week at the new school, including the social dynamics that were beginning to emerge. "Maya-san," Master Tanaka said, using the respectful form of address he'd always employed with his serious students. "Remember that true strength isn't about avoiding conflict, but about choosing your battles wisely. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from restraint, but sometimes action is necessary to prevent greater harm." His words carried the weight of experience and wisdom that came from decades of training students to navigate both physical and psychological challenges. Maya had always valued his guidance, particularly during difficult transitions in her life. "Sensei," Maya asked, "how do you know when restraint becomes enabling? When does avoiding conflict actually make things worse?" Master Tanaka was quiet for a moment before responding. "When your restraint allows others to harm innocent people, or when it encourages behavior that will ultimately lead to greater violence, then action becomes necessary. But remember, Maya-san, the goal is always to neutralize threats with the minimum force required. True martial artists are protectors, not aggressors." Maya spent Saturday mornings settling into her new training routine at the Millbrook Traditional Karate Academy. The familiar rituals of warming up, practicing kata, and working on technique provided a sense of continuity that helped ground her during this period of transition. Sensei Williams paired her with advanced students for sparring sessions, and Maya quickly demonstrated that Master Tanaka's training had prepared her well for continued growth. During a break between training sessions, another student named Alex Martinez approached Maya with a friendly expression. Alex was a junior at a different high school in the district, and he'd been training at the dojo for 3 years. "I heard you just transferred to Riverside High," Alex said. "How are you finding it so far?" Maya considered her response carefully. Alex seemed genuinely interested rather than merely curious about gossip, but she'd learned to be cautious about discussing school problems with people she'd just met. "It's been an adjustment," Maya replied diplomatically. "Every school has its own culture and social dynamics." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Riverside has a reputation around the district for having some pretty intense social hierarchies. My sister graduated from there a few years ago, and she had some stories about students who basically ran the school through intimidation." Maya's interest was piqued by Alex's comment, but she maintained her neutral expression. "I suppose that happens at most schools to some degree." "Maybe," Alex said, "but from what my sister told me, Riverside's administration basically enables certain students because their families have influence in the community. Teachers look the other way, and other students are too scared to speak up when they see harassment happening." The conversation confirmed Maya's growing understanding of the power dynamics at her new school, but it also highlighted her isolation in dealing with the situation. Unlike her previous schools, where administrative support was generally available for students facing harassment, Riverside High seemed to operate under different rules that favored certain students regardless of their behavior. Sunday evening arrived with Maya feeling more centered and confident after her weekend training sessions. The physical exertion and mental focus required by serious martial arts practice had reminded her of her own capabilities and inner strength. Whatever challenges awaited her at school, she felt better prepared to handle them, with the calm confidence that came from genuine self-assurance rather than bravado or fear. As she prepared for another week at Riverside High, Maya reflected on the choices that lay ahead. She could continue trying to avoid conflict while building positive relationships with classmates like Emma and David. She could attempt to appease Trevor and his friends by accepting their social overtures and conforming to their expectations. Or she could maintain her principles and accept whatever consequences followed from her refusal to be intimidated. Maya looked at herself in her bedroom mirror, seeing not just a 17-year-old transfer student, but a young woman who had spent years developing both physical capabilities and mental discipline through dedicated martial arts training. Her calloused knuckles told a story of countless hours practicing technique, her straight posture reflected years of training in proper form and bearing, and her calm eyes held the confidence that came from knowing she could protect herself and others when necessary. The choice, when she really considered it, wasn't difficult at all. Maya had never backed down from bullies, and she wasn't about to start now. Whatever Trevor and his friends had planned, she would meet their challenges with the quiet strength and unwavering resolve that Master Tanaka had helped her cultivate over years of training. Monday morning would bring new tests, but Maya Chen was ready. Monday morning brought an unseasonable chill to Millbrook, and Maya noticed the change in atmosphere the moment she stepped through the doors of Riverside High. Students who had previously offered tentative smiles now averted their eyes. Conversations stopped abruptly when she passed, and the hallways seemed to part around her in a way that felt deliberately orchestrated rather than coincidental. During first period chemistry, Mr. Rodriguez announced a surprise quiz on the previous week's material covering chemical bonding and molecular structures. Maya felt confident about the content, having thoroughly reviewed her notes over the weekend, but she noticed Trevor whispering urgently to Marcus and Jessica before class began. Their body language suggested planning rather than casual conversation, and Maya's instincts told her that whatever they were discussing involved her. As students settled into their seats for the quiz, Trevor raised his hand with apparent concern. "Mr. Rodriguez, I think there might be some confusion about the quiz material. Some students were under the impression that we'd have more time to review the bonding concepts before being tested." Mr. Rodriguez looked puzzled, consulting his lesson plans and gradebook. "The quiz was announced last Wednesday, Trevor. Everyone should have had adequate time to prepare." Trevor glanced meaningfully at Maya before responding. "Well, some of us studied together over the weekend and felt prepared, but I'm worried that students who haven't had access to study groups might be at a disadvantage. Maybe it would be fair to postpone the quiz until tomorrow so everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed." Maya recognized the manipulation immediately. Trevor was positioning himself as an advocate for fairness, while subtly suggesting that she lacked access to the collaborative study resources available to established students. The implication was that her academic success depended on the generosity and inclusion of students like him. Mr. Rodriguez considered Trevor's suggestion, clearly torn between maintaining his planned schedule and appearing insensitive to student concerns about preparation time. Maya watched the internal debate play out on the teacher's face, understanding that her response in this moment would set important precedents for future interactions. "I appreciate Trevor's concern for his classmates," Maya said, speaking directly to Mr. Rodriguez, "but I feel prepared for the quiz as scheduled. I wouldn't want my presence to disrupt established classroom procedures." Her response was diplomatically phrased but strategically important. By expressing readiness for the assessment and declining special accommodations, Maya demonstrated both academic confidence and respect for the teacher's authority. She also avoided falling into Trevor's trap of appearing dependent on his advocacy or accommodation. Mr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly, clearly relieved that the new student was demonstrating appropriate academic preparation and attitude. "Thank you, Maya. We'll proceed with the quiz as planned." Trevor's expression tightened almost imperceptibly at Maya's refusal to play the role he'd assigned her in his narrative. Marcus and Jessica exchanged glances that suggested this development had been anticipated and planned for. Maya sensed that her academic competence and independence were being viewed as challenges that required more direct responses. The quiz proceeded smoothly, with Maya completing her answers with the confidence that came from thorough preparation and genuine understanding of the material. She noticed Trevor finishing unusually quickly, his pencil moving rapidly across the page in a way that suggested either exceptional preparation or alternative methods of obtaining answers. During the transition to second period, Maya found herself surrounded by Trevor's group in the hallway, but their approach was different from previous encounters. Instead of direct confrontation, they engaged in loud conversation that was clearly intended for her to overhear. "Did you see how she tried to make us look bad in chemistry?" Jessica said, her voice carrying just far enough to ensure Maya could hear every word. "Acting like she's so much smarter than everyone else who's been here for years." Marcus nodded in apparent agreement. "Some people come in thinking they're better than the locals. It's pretty disrespectful if you ask me." Trevor's contribution was delivered with practiced sincerity. I tried to help her out by suggesting we postpone the quiz, but she basically told Mr. Rodriguez that the rest of us weren't prepared. That's not very team-spirited. Maya continued walking without acknowledging their performance, but she recognized the sophisticated nature of their psychological strategy. By conducting their harassment through apparently private conversations, they avoided direct confrontation while still delivering their message. Other students witnessing the interaction would hear criticism of Maya without seeing obvious bullying behavior. In American history class, Mrs. Patterson announced that the social movement research projects would be presented starting Wednesday, giving groups 2 additional days to finalize their preparations. Maya felt relieved to have extra time to collaborate with Emma and David, both of whom had contributed valuable research and insights to their project on the labor movement during the Great Depression. However, she noticed Trevor consulting quietly with Mrs. Patterson after class, their conversation taking place at her desk while other students filed out for the lunch period. Maya couldn't hear their discussion, but Trevor's body language suggested he was expressing concern about something related to the upcoming presentations. Emma caught up with Maya in the hallway, her expression troubled. "Maya, I heard Trevor talking to Mrs. Patterson about presentation schedules. I think he might be trying to arrange for his group to present on the same day as ours." David joined them, carrying his lunch tray and looking equally concerned. "That doesn't sound like a coincidence. Trevor's group always presents first when they get to choose their slot. If he's specifically requesting to go the same day as us, there's probably a reason." Maya considered the implications of Trevor's scheduling request. If his group presented immediately before or after hers, he would have opportunities to undermine their work through strategic comparisons, subtle criticism, or direct challenges during the question and answer portion of the presentations. "What topic is his group covering?" Maya asked. Emma consulted her notes from the previous class. "Civil rights movement. Specifically, they're focusing on the resistance to integration in Southern schools during the 1950s and 1960s. The strategic nature of Trevor's topic choice became immediately apparent to Maya. By focusing on historical resistance to integration, his group would have numerous opportunities to make contemporary parallels and subtle references that could target Maya without appearing overtly racist or inappropriate. During lunch, Maya sat with Emma and David at their usual table, but the atmosphere was tense with unspoken concerns. Both of her friends seemed nervous about the escalating conflict between Maya and Trevor's group, and Maya sensed that they were reconsidering their association with her as the social pressure intensified. "Maya," Emma said carefully, "I've been thinking about what we discussed last week. Maybe it would be worth considering some kind of compromise with Trevor and his friends. Not backing down completely, but finding a way to coexist that doesn't keep escalating." David nodded in agreement. "Emma's right. This situation is getting more intense, and I'm worried about what might happen if it keeps building. Trevor's not the type to just let things go." Maya appreciated their concern, but she also recognized the fear that was driving their advice. Emma and David were good people who genuinely cared about her well-being, but they'd also spent years learning to navigate Riverside High's social environment by avoiding conflict with powerful students. "I understand your concerns," Maya replied thoughtfully, "but I've learned that appeasing bullies rarely makes them stop. It usually just teaches them that intimidation works and encourages them to push harder." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several students Maya didn't recognize, upperclassmen who approached their table with the confident bearing of those accustomed to getting their way. The leader of the group was a senior named Brandon Walsh, whose family owned several businesses in Millbrook, and whose influence extended throughout the school's social hierarchy. "You must be Maya," Brandon said, his tone superficially friendly but carrying undertones that suggested this wasn't a casual introduction. "I'm Brandon. I heard you're having some adjustment issues with certain students here." Maya studied Brandon's face, recognizing another player in Riverside High's complex power structure. His intervention suggested that Trevor had escalated the situation by seeking support from older students with even greater social influence. "I wouldn't describe it as adjustment issues," Maya replied calmly. "Just the normal process of getting to know people and finding my place in a new environment." Brandon smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "That's good to hear. Sometimes new students get the wrong impression about how things work here. They think they can just ignore established social dynamics and do whatever they want." Emma and David exchanged nervous glances, clearly recognizing the implicit threat in Brandon's words. Maya sensed that her friends were being used as leverage, their discomfort serving to increase pressure on her to comply with whatever expectations were being communicated. "I've always believed in treating people with respect," Maya said, "and I expect the same in return." Brandon's expression hardened slightly at her refusal to show appropriate deference. "Respect is earned here, Maya. It's not just automatically given to people who think they're special because they've lived in big cities." The comment revealed more information than Brandon probably intended to share. Maya realized that Trevor had been researching her background and sharing details about her family's previous moves with other students. Her urban experiences were being framed as evidence of arrogance and cultural superiority. "I don't think living in different places makes me special," Maya replied. "It's just given me perspective on how different communities handle conflict and cooperation." Brandon leaned closer, his voice dropping to a tone that was clearly meant to be intimidating. "Well, let me give you some perspective on how this community handles students who don't know their place. We have ways of helping them understand expectations." With that veiled threat delivered, Brandon and his companions walked away, leaving Maya alone with Emma and David, both of whom looked increasingly uncomfortable with their association with her. "Maya," David said quietly, "I think you should seriously consider what Brandon was telling you. He's not someone you want as an enemy at this school." Emma nodded in agreement, her expression conflicted. "I like you, Maya, and I think you're getting treated unfairly. But I'm also scared about what might happen if this keeps escalating. Brandon and Trevor have a lot of power here, and they're not afraid to use it." Maya understood that her friends were reaching the limits of their willingness to support her against the school's established power structure. While she appreciated their honesty about their fears, she also recognized that she was increasingly isolated in her resistance to Trevor's group. That afternoon, Maya attended her first official training session at the Millbrook Traditional Karate Academy. Sensei Williams had arranged for her to work with advanced students on sparring techniques, and Maya felt her confidence returning as she moved through familiar forms and combinations. During a water break, Sensei Williams approached Maya with an observant expression. "How are you settling into your new school, Maya?" Sometimes changes in training intensity can reflect stress in other areas of life. Maya considered her response carefully. Sensei Williams had already demonstrated wisdom and insight that went beyond martial arts instruction, and Maya sensed that she could be trusted with more detailed information about the challenges she was facing. "There are some social dynamics that are more complex than I expected," Maya said diplomatically. "Some students seem to view new arrivals as threats to established hierarchies." Sensei Williams nodded thoughtfully. "Bullying behavior often reflects insecurity and fear rather than genuine strength. True martial artists understand that confidence comes from self-improvement, not from dominating others." Her words carried the weight of experience, and Maya suspected that Sensei Williams had encountered similar situations with other students over the years. The martial arts community often attracted young people who were dealing with various forms of conflict or harassment. "Sensei," Maya asked, "how do you know when it's appropriate to use martial arts skills outside the dojo? I've always been taught that physical techniques should be a last resort." Sensei Williams considered the question seriously before responding. "The primary purpose of martial arts training is self-defense and the protection of others who cannot protect themselves. Physical intervention becomes appropriate when other methods have failed and when genuine harm is imminent." She paused, studying Maya's expression. "However, the greatest victories often come from avoiding physical confrontation entirely. Your presence, confidence, and refusal to be intimidated can often neutralize threats without any need for physical techniques." Maya spent the remainder of the training session working on advanced kata, flowing through complex sequences of movements that combined offensive and defensive techniques. The familiar patterns helped center her mind and remind her of the years of discipline and training that had shaped her character. Tuesday morning brought new challenges as Maya discovered that someone had broken into her locker overnight. Her textbooks were scattered on the floor, her notebooks had pages torn out, and a crude message was written on the inside of her locker door, questioning her right to attend Riverside High. Maya photographed the damage with her phone before cleaning up the mess, documenting evidence while considering her options for response. She could report the incident to school administrators, but Emma and David's warnings about institutional protection for certain students made her doubt the effectiveness of official channels. During first period chemistry, Maya noticed Trevor watching her carefully, clearly expecting some reaction to the locker vandalism. When she showed no visible distress or anger, his expression shifted to frustration at her failure to provide the emotional response he'd anticipated. Mr. Rodriguez announced that quiz results from the previous day would be returned at the end of class, and Maya felt confident about her performance despite the morning's unpleasant discovery. However, when she received her graded paper, she was shocked to see a grade of 65%, with numerous answers marked incorrect, despite her certainty that they had been accurate. After class, Maya approached Mr. Rodriguez's desk to discuss her quiz results. She carefully reviewed each marked answer, pointing out specific textbook references and chemical formulas that supported her original responses. Mr. Rodriguez examined her arguments thoughtfully, cross-referencing her answers against the textbook and his answer key. After several minutes of review, he looked up with a troubled expression. "Maya, I think there may have been an error in grading your quiz. These answers are clearly correct, and I'm not sure how they were marked wrong originally." Maya felt a chill of understanding as she realized what had likely happened. Someone with access to her quiz paper had altered her answers before grading, creating the appearance of poor academic performance that could be used to question her intellectual abilities. "Would it be possible to retake the quiz or have my grade corrected based on the accurate review?" Maya asked. Mr. Rodriguez nodded immediately. "Of course. I'll correct your grade in my records, and I apologize for the confusion. This kind of error is very unusual." As Maya left the chemistry classroom, she noticed Trevor and Marcus engaged in conversation near the lockers. Their body language suggested disappointment rather than satisfaction, and Maya realized that her calm response to both the locker vandalism and the quiz manipulation had failed to produce the dramatic emotional breakdown they'd anticipated. During second period American history, Mrs. Patterson announced the final presentation schedule for the social movement projects. As Emma had predicted, Trevor's group was scheduled to present immediately before Maya's group, creating obvious opportunities for strategic undermining of their work. Mrs. Patterson also mentioned that presentations would be evaluated not only on research and content but also on students' ability to respond thoughtfully to questions and challenges from their classmates. Maya recognized this as another vulnerability that Trevor's group could exploit through strategic questioning designed to embarrass or confuse her. At lunch, Maya found Emma and David sitting at a different table, surrounded by students she didn't recognize. When she approached with her lunch tray, Emma looked up with an expression of genuine regret and conflict. "Maya, I'm really sorry, but we've been getting a lot of pressure about sitting with you. Some people have been suggesting that we're choosing sides in a conflict that doesn't really involve us." David nodded reluctantly. "It's not that we don't like you or support you, but we're worried about becoming targets ourselves. This situation has gotten bigger than just a disagreement between you and Trevor." Maya understood their position, even though their abandonment stung more than she'd expected. Emma and David were choosing self-preservation over principle, a decision that was rational but disappointing. "I understand," Maya said calmly. "I hope we can still work together on our presentation tomorrow." Emma's relief was visible as she nodded. "Of course, the project is really important, and we've all contributed good work to it." Maya spent the remainder of lunch sitting alone, observing the complex social dynamics that governed interaction at Riverside High. Students moved in careful patterns that avoided crossing invisible boundaries, their behavior governed by fear of association with anyone who had fallen out of favor with the established power structure. During her solitary lunch, Maya noticed several students glancing in her direction with expressions of sympathy, curiosity, or concern. She sensed that not everyone at Riverside High supported Trevor's behavior, but the institutional protection he enjoyed made it dangerous for students to openly oppose him. After school, Maya returned to the karate dojo for an intensive training session focused on sparring and self-defense applications. Sensei Williams paired her with Jake Morrison, a college student who had been training for 6 years and whose skill level provided an appropriate challenge for Maya's abilities. During their sparring session, Jake tested Maya's defensive skills with controlled attacks that required quick thinking and precise responses. Maya found herself flowing naturally through combinations of blocks, counters, and evasive movements that demonstrated years of serious training. "You've got excellent technique," Jake commented during a break between rounds. "Your sensei in Denver clearly prepared you well for advanced training." Sensei Williams had been observing their session, and she approached Maya with an approving expression. "Your muscle memory and reaction time suggest consistent practice over many years. How long have you been training seriously?" "Since I was 7, Maya replied. "My parents enrolled me after we moved to a neighborhood where self-defense skills seemed important." Sensei Williams nodded thoughtfully. 10 years of training creates deep neural pathways that become instinctive under stress. That kind of preparation serves students well, both inside and outside the dojo. Her comments seemed to carry additional meaning, as if she understood that Maya might soon need to apply her training in situations beyond controlled sparring sessions. That evening, Maya spent time reviewing her research notes for the upcoming presentation, while also practicing defensive scenarios in her bedroom. She moved through kata sequences slowly and silently, visualizing potential confrontations and her appropriate responses to various types of attacks. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "New girl thinks she's tough. Tomorrow you learn what happens to people who don't know their place." Maya screenshotted the message and added it to her growing documentation of harassment, but she also recognized it as evidence that the situation was escalating beyond psychological intimidation toward the possibility of physical confrontation. Wednesday morning arrived with heavy gray clouds and the promise of thunderstorms, weather that seemed to mirror the tension Maya felt as she prepared for what might be a pivotal day at Riverside High. She dressed carefully in clothes that would allow for easy movement if physical self-defense became necessary, while still maintaining appropriate appearance for her presentation. During first period chemistry, Mr. Rodriguez returned corrected quiz grades and announced that Maya had received the highest score in the class, a revelation that prompted murmurs of surprise and grudging respect from her classmates. Trevor's expression darkened at this public acknowledgement of Maya's academic excellence. After class, Maya found herself surrounded by Trevor's group in the hallway, but their formation was different from previous encounters. Instead of loose clustering, they arranged themselves in positions that blocked her movement in multiple directions, creating a more overtly threatening situation. "Congratulations on your quiz score," Trevor said, his voice carrying sarcasm rather than genuine praise. "It's amazing how well people can do when they get special treatment from teachers." Maya recognized the accusation being leveled against her, the suggestion that her academic success resulted from favoritism rather than merit. The comment was designed to undermine her achievements while positioning Trevor as a victim of unfair treatment. "I studied the material thoroughly," Maya replied calmly. The same opportunity was available to everyone in the class. Marcus stepped closer, his physical presence clearly intended to intimidate. "Maybe you studied a little too thoroughly. Maybe you had access to information that other students didn't have." The accusation of cheating was delivered loudly enough for nearby students to hear, creating whispers and speculation that would spread throughout the school, regardless of whether any evidence supported the claim. Maya felt her anger rising but maintained her composure through the mental discipline that years of martial arts training had instilled. "I'm confident that Mr. Rodriguez can verify the integrity of my work if anyone has concerns about academic honesty." Jessica laughed mockingly. "Oh, we're sure Mr. Rodriguez would support you. Teachers here love students who make them look good, especially when those students come from sophisticated backgrounds." The comment contained multiple layers of implication, suggesting both teacher favoritism and cultural superiority that positioned Maya as an outsider who received unfair advantages. Maya realized that Trevor's group had carefully crafted a narrative that could appeal to various grievances and resentments among their classmates. "I'm going to be late for my next class," Maya said, attempting to end the confrontation before it escalated further. Trevor moved to block her path more directly, his body language shifting from subtle intimidation to open aggression. "We're not finished talking yet." You've been disrespecting our school and our community since you arrived, and that needs to stop. Maya assessed her situation quickly, noting the positions of Trevor's allies and identifying potential escape routes if the confrontation turned physical. Her training had taught her to remain calm under pressure while continuously evaluating tactical options. "I've tried to be respectful to everyone I've met," Maya said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "If you have specific concerns about my behavior, I'm willing to discuss them." Trevor's response was to step even closer, entering what martial artists recognized as the range where physical violence became not only possible but likely. Maya felt her body automatically shifting into a more balanced stance, her weight distributed in a way that would allow for quick defensive movements. "Here's my specific concern," Trevor said, his voice low and threatening. "You think you can come into our school and act like you're better than everyone else. You think you can ignore people who've been here for years and just do whatever you want." Maya realized that the confrontation had reached a critical point where de-escalation might no longer be possible. Trevor's body language suggested he was preparing to initiate physical contact, and Maya knew that her response in the next few moments would determine how the situation resolved. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Maya replied, her voice carrying a new edge of steel that reflected her growing readiness to defend herself. "But I also won't pretend to be less than I am to make others feel comfortable." The challenge in her words was unmistakable, and Maya saw Trevor's expression shift from anger to rage as he realized that intimidation alone would not break her spirit. She had drawn a line that she would not cross, and Trevor understood that further escalation would require him to back up his threats with action. The hallway around them had gradually emptied as other students sensed the dangerous tension and found reasons to be elsewhere. Maya realized that she was increasingly isolated with Trevor's group, a situation that could quickly turn violent without witnesses to intervene or document what happened. Trevor's hand moved toward Maya's shoulder in what appeared to be a gesture of emphasis, but which Maya recognized as the beginning of a physical assault. Her training kicked in automatically as she prepared to defend herself against whatever came next, knowing that the moment of truth she had been anticipating was finally at hand. Trevor's hand shot forward toward Maya's shoulder. But what happened next shattered every assumption he'd made about the quiet transfer student. Maya's body moved with fluid precision, her left hand intercepting his wrist while simultaneously stepping offline from his attack vector. In one seamless motion, she applied a joint lock that sent Trevor stumbling backward, his face contorting in shock and pain. Marcus lunged forward to help his friend, but Maya was already moving. Years of training had programmed her responses into muscle memory that activated without conscious thought. She ducked under his wild swing and delivered a precise palm strike to his solar plexus that dropped him to his knees, gasping for breath. Jessica screamed, more from surprise than fear, as Maya spun to face the remaining threats. Her stance was perfect, balanced and ready, her hands positioned in the classical defensive posture that Master Tanaka had drilled into her thousands of times. The transformation from seemingly vulnerable teenager to formidable martial artist was so complete that Trevor's group couldn't process what they were witnessing. "What the hell are you?" Trevor gasped, cradling his wrist and backing away from Maya's calm intensity. Maya's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had finally stopped hiding her true capabilities. "Someone who's tired of your games." Brandon Walsh and two other seniors rounded the corner just as Marcus was struggling to his feet, their arrival turning a manageable situation into something far more dangerous. Brandon's eyes widened as he took in the scene. Trevor holding his injured wrist, Marcus doubled over and breathing heavily, and Maya standing in a combat stance that spoke of serious training. "You made a big mistake, little girl," Brandon snarled, pulling out his phone. "Nobody attacks students at this school and gets away with it." Maya realized that witnesses were arriving and that the narrative of events would be shaped by whoever controlled the story. She straightened from her defensive posture but remained alert, knowing that more violence might still be necessary. "I defended myself against assault," Maya said clearly, her voice carrying to the growing crowd of students. "Everything I did was in response to physical attacks." Mr. Rodriguez appeared at the end of the hallway, drawn by the commotion and Jessica's continued screaming. His expression shifted from confusion to concern as he assessed the situation, noting the positions of the students and the obvious signs of a physical altercation. "What happened here?" he demanded, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. Trevor immediately launched into his version of events, portraying himself as the victim of an unprovoked attack by a dangerous new student who had used excessive force against peaceful classmates. His performance was convincing, playing on existing assumptions about Maya as an outsider who didn't understand local customs. Maya waited for her turn to speak, then delivered a calm and factual account of the escalating harassment campaign that had culminated in Trevor's physical assault. She mentioned the locker vandalism, the altered quiz answers, and the text message threats, pulling out her phone to show documented evidence. Principal Morrison arrived with school security, his expression grim as he surveyed the scene. Maya knew that this moment would determine whether justice prevailed or whether institutional protection would shield Trevor's group from consequences. "I want all involved students in my office immediately," Principal Morrison announced. "We'll sort this out properly." The investigation took 3 hours, during which Maya provided detailed documentation of the harassment campaign, while Trevor's group attempted to portray themselves as victims of reverse discrimination. However, Maya's evidence was overwhelming. Photographs, text messages, witness statements from students who had finally found courage to speak up, and security footage that showed Trevor initiating physical contact. By afternoon, Trevor was suspended for 2 weeks, pending a formal disciplinary hearing. Marcus faced similar consequences, while Jessica received detention for her role in the harassment campaign. Brandon's intervention had been witnessed by multiple students, leading to his suspension as well. Maya returned to classes the next day to find a transformed social environment. Students who had previously avoided her out of fear now approached with genuine respect and curiosity. Her presentation on labor movements earned praise from Mrs. Patterson and applause from classmates who had discovered new appreciation for her intelligence and courage. Emma and David apologized for abandoning her during the crisis, but Maya understood that fear had driven their actions. True friendship required courage that not everyone possessed when tested by genuine adversity. At the dojo that evening, Sensei Williams observed Maya's improved confidence and centered energy. The confrontation had proven that years of training weren't just theoretical concepts, but practical skills that could protect her when necessary. "You handled a difficult situation with appropriate restraint and precise application of force," Sensei Williams noted approvingly. "That's the mark of a true martial artist." Maya continued training at Millbrook Traditional Karate Academy while excelling academically at Riverside High. Trevor's group never bothered her again, having learned that quiet students sometimes possess the most dangerous capabilities. Other potential bullies took note of what happened when intimidation met genuine skill and unshakable resolve. Years later, Maya graduated as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to study engineering. Trevor eventually transferred schools after his disciplinary record made college applications difficult. The story of the transfer student's hidden karate skills became legend at Riverside High, inspiring other students to stand up against harassment and proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon is refusing to be a victim. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.